This video will work through problem 6.2 from Gapenski's Healthcare Finance 6th edition. All right, so in problem 6.2, we're going to continue to build off of the work we did in 6.1. So I'm retaining the work we did from 6.1 here. Right, we knew that the cost pool was $100,000. We identified the cost drivers as either revenue by department or hours of housekeeping services, and then we arrived at an allocation rate as 2 cents per dollar of revenue or $20 per hour for the departments. But in 6.1, we didn't have the individual department, subordinate departments, and their respective revenues or housekeeping hours, but now we do. And so we can take this information. We're going to need the two allocation rates, the 2 cents per dollar of revenue or the $20 per hour, to calculate the amount of housekeeping services that are allocated to the departments. So let's start. We're going to have adult service, and their revenue is $3 million. We have peds, and their revenue is $1.5 million. And then we have other, and their revenue is $500. So if we want to allocate housekeeping based on revenues, we go back and we say, okay, we said that that would be 2 cents of housekeeping for every dollar of revenue. So now we have the dollars of revenue, and we simply multiply each of these by 2 cents per dollar of revenue. So this is our dollars of revenue. So 2 cents times 3 million, 2 cents times 1.5 million, and 2 cents times 500,000. So 2 cents times 3 million is 60,000. 2 cents times 1.5 million is 30,000. And 2 cents times 500,000 is 10,000. So that is our allocation. And the nice thing about this technique is you can simply add them up, back up the allocated amounts, right? 60 plus 30 is 90 plus 10 is 100. And that matches the original cost pool that we said for housekeeping was $100,000. So that kind of confirms for us that we did it correctly. Okay. Now we'll do it instead of doing it by dollar amount. We're going to do it by hours. So we have adult, peds, and other. And now we have hours, and the hours are 1,500, 3,000, and 500. And we said that the allocation rate when we do it by hours was $20 per hour. So we're going to take the number of hours times 20 times 20 times 20 to give us the allocation. So we've got 20 times 1,500, that's 30,000. 20 times 3,000 is 60,000. And 20 times 500 is 10,000. Again, we can add it back up. 30 plus 60 is 90 plus 10 is 100,000. So once again, we have gotten to the same total. Or back to the cost pool total. So now the next question is, what is the difference in allocation to each department between the two drivers? So this is hours. We can bring these down, hours versus revenue. So we have 30 versus 60, 60 versus 30, and 10 versus 10. So the difference here is under revenue, there's a 30,000 plus to adult services. Under revenue, there's a 30,000 reduction for peds and no difference for other. So which of the two drivers is better and why? Well, so there's two principles we want to consider when we are trying to decide which allocation method is, or rather, which cost driver is better. Well, the two things we want to consider are, one, fairness. So which is more fair? And in fairness, we really want more accuracy with respect to the cost being allocated. So the question you want to ask yourself is, which of the drivers that we choose, revenues or hours of housekeeping, most accurately represents the amount of housekeeping cost that the respective subordinate organizations generate? I would say revenue has relatively little to do with housekeeping costs, and hours of housekeeping is pretty much directly related to the amount of cost that an organization is generating. So I would say, in terms of fairness, if it takes a really long time for the housekeeping team to clean your area, then you probably ought to be paying more of the bill than the areas that take less time to clean. So from my perspective, it seems like hours would be better. So the hours system would allocate twice as much housekeeping cost to the peds section than to the adult section, and the same amount to the other. So I would go with hours. The other thing that you want to consider when choosing an appropriate driver is the ability for the organization, the subordinate organization's manager, to influence the utilization of the service. So if you're using revenue as your driver, the way that your manager would bring down his or her allocation of housekeeping costs would be to reduce revenue. Now that you certainly don't want to incentivize your manager to do, right? On the other hand, if we went straight at hours, the manager might be incentivized to try to think about, okay, what processes can I put in place to reduce the number of hours that housekeepers have to come in and work in our area? So that is a better, hours again, is a better method for incentivizing and encouraging managers to improve their operations in order to reduce costs. You certainly don't want the managers incentivized to reduce revenue. So that makes more sense. And then a third element here would be cost. So remember, revenue is kind of automatically calculated, right? It's already being calculated as a result of a different function, your billing function. So it's kind of just a free, you have free access to it, separate from trying to calculate how much housekeeping to allocate to everybody. So you're already calculating the revenues, so you could just use them. So there's no additional cost to using revenue. But if you're going to keep track of hours, somebody has to actually do that. Somebody has to keep track of the hours by department. That means that somebody is doing more work than if we use the revenue to drive instead. So there's a cost to that. The question is the cost imposed by doing this worth the more accurate outcome? So that's a question. I would say probably, because it's probably not a big cost to calculate. And this is a really big discrepancy. So I would say it's probably worth it, but that is a question you have to ask.